Thank you, colleagues, for joining the second talk for the year. Today, we're talking the inner city of Durban. We have three speakers from eThekwini. We're talking economy and just the inner city of Durban. So I hope that we'll be able to make inroads on solutions that our city needs. Our first speaker will be Dr. Maharaj. Ajiv Maharaj is currently the Deputy Head of Economic Development at eThekwini Municipality and chairs the Economic Trade Affairs and Investment Forum at the Durban Chamber of Commerce and Industry. He holds a Master's in Town and Regional Planning and a PhD in Geography from the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Dr. Maharaj, over to you, sir.
Thanks a lot for that introduction, Sura, and good morning, colleagues. It's great to be chatting to you today. Let me see if I can share my presentation firstly. I'm hoping that's visible.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Okay, great. So, yeah, I think this is my first conversation with architects. So it's really great, and I'm excited to be here presenting, and look forward to the discussion as well. So my talk will really give you an overview of the economy. It kind of like it'll take a helicopter view of the economy, looking at it globally, nationally, locally, and then get into some of the key issues that eThekwini is facing, and yeah, talk a little bit about that. But before I start, let me just turn my camera off, if I can see how to do that, just to make sure the connectivity is fine. Yeah. All right. Let's start presentation. Okay, great. So, you know, I've titled it "Navigating the Poly Crisis" because eThekwini in particular has been through a number of crises in the last couple of years. Starting off, I think let me start off broadly. Globally, GDP in 2023 is estimated to be about 2.6%. So it's estimated it grew a lot slower than initially thought. And the main reason for that was that inflation was higher than expected. Inflation globally remained high throughout 2023. It started to come down towards the end of the year, but still stubbornly high. And in markets such as the US, as well as South Africa, we saw interest rates increasing, resulting in an affordability issue among consumers and a cost of living problem. Interest rates have come down. So we saw in South Africa, it has come down to about 5.7% thereabouts towards the end of last year. But it's unlikely that we'll see any kind of easing in the interest rates through most of this year. I think I anticipate in the last quarter we should see some change. Although, while saying that, we are in an election year, and most economies globally are in an election year as well. And we know that during election years, things don't go according to plan, and often, the interest rates start to ease off a little too quickly. So that's one of the unknowns in the global economy, particularly in the US, where you also will have elections happening. So at the World Economic Forum, at the recent meeting, the kind of biggest risks they they anticipated were firstly extreme weather events, and we're seeing that in Durban. Extreme weather events are becoming more commonplace. AI, both a big risk and an opportunity, and then a number of other risks. But I think importantly for the next decade is this kind of changing global hegemony, and South Africa's role in that will be something interesting to watch and see. I think just um, uh, just Israel announced yesterday that it was cutting imports from South Africa, so they stopped importing South African grapes, which is not too significant for South Africa. The Western Cape, kind of Israel is about 2% of its market, so not significant, but I think that's something to watch as things change globally. So for this year, for last year, we had the IMF had anticipated that economic growth in South Africa would have been about 0.6%. That estimate will come out in about March, so we'll know for sure. But looking forward to 2024, growth will remain low, mainly as a result of the different crises that we're facing at the moment, and I'll chat a little bit more around that. But really, both eThekwini, KwaZulu-Natal, and the South African economy very closely linked, and growth is not anticipated to happen. At least in the next 5 years, the economy is going to remain subdued, and we're unlikely to see any significant changes. In terms of GDP, so I thought the best way of looking at what's happening nationally is just to look at the different aspects of GDP. Firstly, on the investment side, so that GFCF is gross fixed capital formation. So it's all of the investment that happens in the economy. So investment last year was, it held up GDP a bit because, especially in the first quarter, a lot of companies were investing in private energy generation, battery technology, and the like, solar panels, and generators as well. So that kind of held things up a bit, but looking at this year and going forward, the outlook in terms of investment remains weak because business confidence is weak, and I'll chat a little bit more around why that is as well. It's also an election year, so we're unlikely to see some big, certainly from the private sector, big investments. On the export and import side of the net, exports last year, imports were increased mainly because of energy equipment, but also, we had weak commodity prices. So our exports in terms of coal and other commodities, the prices fell. That brought down the value of our exports. And then also the logistical problems. On the other side of it is PCE, which is personal consumption expenditure. This is what you and me spend as households. There was that performed well initially, but as interest rates increased, that the pressure started to mount on household spending. And you see, economic growth in the third quarter of last year was minus 0.2%. The last one, GCE, which is government consumption expenditure. So this is our fiscal as a country where we sit. So National Treasury has had they have a three-pronged strategy. Firstly, grow revenue. Secondly, reduce government spending. And thirdly, reduce government debt. So that's the three kind of pronged approach. And the second two, they've done reasonably well. On the first point, on growing revenue, is where the problem comes in. They've grown revenue mainly by improving the efficiency of SARS, but the problem is you can only do that for so long. We need to increase the economic base and increase revenue through that, and that's been not happening. We've got a stagnant economy that is hurting tax revenue, while government expenditure this year in particular, I think, will probably stay high because it's an election year. And there are a lot of demands from the state-owned entities, Transnet, huge problems, ESCOM and the like. So while government is trying to reduce spending, it's limited in what it can do because of the failings of a lot of the state-owned entities. So all of that is weighing down on the outlook. And certainly from a debt point of view, the country is in a worrying situation going forward. The four kind of big issues that we face. Firstly, like I mentioned, the slowdown in the global economy. Secondly, electricity shortage. So ESCOM now produces less electricity, or produces the same amount of electricity than it did in 2000. So 24 years later, and 500 billion rand later, it's not producing any more electricity. In fact, in 2023, it produced 4% less electricity than it did in 2022. And that's been on a downward trend for some time. And there hasn't been a real turnaround in that, despite all of the interventions. Logistics failure. So this is a big concern. The failing of the port system, the inefficiency of the port, and Transnet requiring bailouts. That's putting pressure on the fiscus as well. And then, of course, higher interest rates have been another issue to contend with. So, just looking at it from a rail perspective, you can see on the line graph there, the volumes of train, freight rail volumes decreased through to 2020. That's 2021. It's decreased even further in 2022 and 2023. So rail essentially has collapsed, and there are huge challenges. At the same time, truck numbers have increased. We've seen the problems around the Richards Bay port, and you can see that in the number of trucks arriving at the port. And while there's some emergency interventions that have been put in place, it's going to take time, and it's going to take a lot of investment to turn that around. Coming to Durban, which is where I wanted to spend a little bit more time, on eThekwini in the last quarter of, in the third quarter of 2023, we saw a contraction in agriculture and manufacturing, as well as in construction. The thing that's held up our economy has been the services sector, particularly things like, for example, your call centers. We've seen a lot of jobs being created in that space. So in terms of job creation in Durban specifically, so we've got about 1.2 million people employed in a population of just over 4 million people. So, less than half of our population, economically active population, are in employment, or they have some kind of employment. And in the third quarter of last year, we lost 12,000 jobs. we're still significantly below where we were in 2015. So 2015, 2016, when we reached the height in terms of our job numbers, we still have a way to go before we get back there. Yeah, just looking at to put Durban's economy in context, I wanted to make this point, is that it's a relatively large economy. In fact, the top 5 cities, top 5 metros in the country account for almost 60% of the country's economy. So you have Joburg, which is Gauteng, which is the largest province economically, KZN second, Western Cape third, and if we were to put eThekwini on among the other provinces, eThekwini would be fourth, sorry, after Western Cape. In other words, it's bigger than the whole of the Eastern Cape. It's the eThekwini economy is bigger than the whole of the Eastern Cape and the Northern Cape put together. So it's relatively big from that point of view. Although when we look at it from and its performance, and we look at it historically in terms of the different cities, Joburg's been the biggest economy, followed by 3 cities that kind of compete for second place, which is Durban, Cape Town, and Tshwane. At the moment, and particularly in the last 2 to 3 years, Cape Town's grown faster than Durban. So it's the second largest, Durban third, and Tshwane the fourth. Although Tshwane has been catching up over the last 10 years. It's grown faster than some of the other cities. In terms of the makeup of GDP in Durban, we see now that finance has become the biggest sector, and finance includes things like your real estate. It includes global business services or call centers, as well as banking and other business services. So that currently makes up the biggest component of GDP, followed by manufacturing. And then we have a couple of other sectors, community services, trade, as well as transport and the like. And if we look at the same thing in terms of employment, we see trade has been the biggest employer. So this includes all of your shopping centers and all of that, followed by community services, finance, and then manufacturing. So those are the kind of 4 biggest employers in the Durban economy. It's quite a diverse economy. And the thing that has been growing and creating jobs is the finance sector. There's also a close relationship between employment and investment. And as much as the rhetoric is often about job creation, we won't have significant job creation unless we create a good environment for investment. And investment, for that to happen, we need to look at things like the cost and ease of doing business, how easy is it to do business in the city, the reliability of services, and so forth. So we do run every quarter a business confidence index in partnership with the Durban Chamber and UKZN. And in the last quarter, we saw business confidence decrease. So the yellow bar is Durban, and the black bar is South African, SACI, South African Chamber of Business, their business confidence index. So while it's marginally higher than the national, it's still a major concern. Business confidence is low, and the main reason that is so is poor service delivery. And that's the biggest thing that businesses are reporting. as their challenge. One of the areas, like I mentioned, that has been creating jobs is your call center industry. So last year, well, in the first kind of quarter of last year, the 85% of the jobs nationally created nationally in the sector were in Durban. So really, we're doing well in terms of attracting this sector. There are challenges. It's not to say there aren't challenges, but certainly something that is going right. And in 2022, we created over 9,500 jobs in this new jobs in the sector alone. Tourism. So I didn't look at. Yeah, maybe in future we can do that, but I just looked at the number of arrivals at King Shaka International Airport, the number of, and we see that that has decreased. So we haven't gotten back to the 2020 levels, pre-COVID levels. We're still significantly below that, both from an international travel and a domestic travel point of view. And there's still a lot of work to be done to get our tourism industry back on its feet. The positive side, we have had some positive news around Hilton taking a decision to reopen. So I think that will assist as well as new airlines providing international flights. The other area that we have performed well as a city is in addressing poverty. So Stats SA runs this community survey, and in terms of that, eThekwini performed well. We had the fewest number of people that went hungry, in other words, that were food deprived. So of all the major cities, people generally don't go hungry in Durban. And there's a number of reasons for that. Part of it is, that there is a social package in place, that social grants have a wide coverage, but, it also relates to things like climate and local agriculture and so forth. In terms of SARS data, so SARS, now we get relatively good data from SARS, and from that we can see that in terms of formal jobs in the 2021-22, at the end of the 2022 tax year, our average income for Durban was 6,500 rand. So really low average income. And even when we compare it to the other cities, we compare better to cities like Nelson Mandela Bay and Buffalo City, rather than Tshwane or Joburg and the like. So that is a challenge, and that speaks to the approach as a city that we need to take in terms of growing the economy. The SARS data also goes down to a fine grain, so it can tell you what sector at a fine grain level, what kind of firms exist there, what kind of jobs exist. You can see in Cape Town, the wholesale retail trade sector is dominant. In Joburg, the green is the financial services, and in Durban you see more red, which is your manufacturing activity. In terms of valuation role at the city level, since 2008 to 2022, so kind of done all of that work on GIS, and it's available on the Durban Edge portal. And Umhlanga now, in terms of property value, has exceeded the Durban inner city. But the Durban inner city is still critical. It's still a bigger employer, so it's got more jobs. It's got more small businesses than Umhlanga or any other node in the province. So it's critical that we support and grow the the inner city. I thought, just to take a very quick snapshot, but I don't want to get into what Subs is going to present, which is more on the Durban inner city. So just in terms of that period, 2008 to 2022, you can see the growth in residential valuation on the left, and then the growth in business and commercial in the right. And basically the picture is telling us that residential has performed quite badly. Commercial has performed relatively better, although it's been in certain precincts. Building plan activity as well. I think let me just skip over that. Yeah, there are a number of investments that are planned and that are happening. So these are just some of the investments that are happening. So your Toyota, that's gone up to about 800 million rand now, which they're investing in renewable energy, and that's largely to take them off the grid. That's not good for the municipality. They're one of our biggest electricity customers, and certainly from an electricity revenue point of view, the municipality is going to be under pressure. But you see there below Toyota, advanced call center technology. So that call center, 285 million rand investment creates 1,000 jobs, whereas an investment of close to 700 million rand there in renewable energy just creates 9 permanent jobs. These are so. In certainly the call center industry, whatever we may think of it, it creates a lot of employment. In terms of new businesses being created in the municipality and where that's being created, we're creating far too many small businesses. And that's a huge problem for us. You can see Cape Town, with a similar population as eThekwini, is creating about more than double the number of startups that we're creating in Durban. Even Tshwane, significantly more startups are being created than in Durban. And the areas in which the startups are being created, you can see the green, the dark green, your Mshlanga, your inner city. So it's the traditional nodes, whereas your township areas, we're seeing a loss of businesses, although we don't know why that is. Why are businesses closing down in the township areas? There's more work that's required in that space. I thought we'd have a quick look at the city government, in other words, the municipality, and what's been happening in the recent past. Firstly, from a capital budget point of view, we saw that the capital budget had declined over a period of time, and it's not just in eThekwini, in a number of the other cities as well. We see over time that this is the inflation adjusted, so it's taking it down to 2015 constant prices. The amount that we're investing in infrastructure has been decreasing over a long period of time. And the current challenges we're experiencing in water and electricity is largely as a result of that. There are other reasons. There are more, reasons related to corruption, related to all kinds of things. But the main reason is that there's been an underinvestment in infrastructure over an extended period of time. Now, for 2023, 2022, 2023, we started to see a slight improvement. And then in this year, in terms of the capital budget, so we've got a capital budget of 8.1 billion rand. And, while expenditure is still low, I think we must make that point. We've got a significantly bigger capital budget this year, but expenditure thus far has been low, and we have some concerns on whether we'll be able to spend the entire capital budget. And that there needs to be a sustained increase in the capital budget, and the increase in the capital budget's proportion of the overall city budget. So at one stage, it was close to 20%. It dropped down to 9% in 2021, 22. So it was at a low point, and that started to improve since then. So we're hoping that with the 5.1 billion rand budgeted in the next 3 years for water infrastructure, that we can start to see a turnaround in the water infrastructure. You can see the red line in this graph is the amount of water we buy, and the yellow line is the amount of water we sell. So the difference, about 60% of the water that we buy from Umgeni Water is not sold, it's lost. Either it's lost through the system, through leaks, it's lost through free basic service, provision of free basic services, it's lost through whatever the reasons. But that and the worrying thing is that gap has been widening over the years. So just to the north of the city, we have in Kwadikuza, we have SAIA Water providing water to residents, and that's a PPP. So that's a private partnership that the municipality has. They started off with 33% water loss. 20 years ago, it's now down to 8%, and included in that 8% is the free basic, services. So there are best practice models. It's a question of how we take those forward, how we integrate them, and how we address our challenges. This looks at rates, and I thought it would be important to look at rates because that's raised by developers a lot, particularly of vacant land rates. And vacant land rates in eThekwini are the highest of any of the rate categories in all of the municipalities. That's on the negative side. On the positive side, there have been talks with Treasury. They have agreed to provide rebates on vacant land to businesses that intend developing. We've also, eThekwini was the first city to provide incentives, and incentives are still available. 15 billion rand worth of investment has been approved in terms of for receiving incentives, and it translates to roughly an incentive of 40 million rand rebate per annum that the municipality is providing to various companies, and all investment qualifies for it. Well, let me qualify that. All business and commercial and industrial investment qualifies for a rate rebate. No matter where it is, it qualifies. But if there's an investment in the inner city, residential also qualifies, but only within the inner city, and only if it's high density residential above 80 dwelling units per hectare. So, and the inner city incentive is more attractive. We try to put something more attractive than in the rest of the city. So lastly, where to from here? So yeah, I think I won't spend too much time on this, just that I think we on the blue line there, we middle of the road. Last year, we would have just missed recession. This year, 1% growth is, and going forward, for the next couple of years, we don't anticipate anything significantly higher unless there's huge changes. So just the last slide in terms of summary. So in the next 5 years, we think growth in Durban will be driven by public sector investment, Sanral, who's making a huge investment in roads in the municipality. Of course, it's causing a lot of headache for us as road users, but nonetheless, Transnet, huge capital budget, 98 billion rand to spend in Durban in the next 5 years. Can they deliver? I really doubt that. I have real doubts as to whether that can be achieved. Service delivery, a major challenge for Durban, tourism and water infrastructure. So we've seen how sanitation issues have impacted our tourism industry. Water and sanitation currently is our Achilles heel, and it will take time to address. There is a 5 billion rand budget in the medium term allocated to water, and increasing the capital budget is a step in the right direction. So that 8.1 billion rand capital budget. There's also 200 million budgeted for the South Industrial Basin to address the flood mitigation issues. We have some Dutch colleagues from the Dutch government coming to assist with planning around that, and hopefully, if we talks are underway with Transnet to address the upgrade of Damla's Canal. So there are initiatives in place. Business confidence remains low. It's a key pillar. And unless we address the fundamentals, we're not going to see a dramatic change in terms of job creation. Despite all of the rhetoric that might happen, job creation will not be significantly increased. Energy, huge opportunity. We've heard the city announce its plans around the Independent Power Producers Program, 400 megawatts. Unfortunately, not much in terms of actual delivery at this stage. And that's where I think we need to see ironically, more energy being put into. Toyota's investment, not good for the municipality. If we, given our low income base as a municipality, our incomes are relatively low compared to the other cities. We have to grow exports. We have to earn finances from outside of the municipal area. Catalytic investments, so there's some good catalytic projects happening. Chongweni, 8 billion rand. Brickworks, huge investment, Giba Business Estate, the Auto Supplier Park, and there's a pipeline, there's the 217 billion rand pipeline of catalytic projects, and those need to be pushed and implemented as fast as possible. In the short term, the ICT sector, innovation, as well as your global business services, that's where most of your employment and your economic growth is going to come from. Construction has been under pressure, and I think construction is related to a number of the issues, including business confidence. And unless we address that, we're not going to really do justice to the kind of historically big construction industry that we've had in Durban. We need to make some fundamental changes to realize that potential. And then, amidst all of the threats, there are opportunities. There's huge opportunities. Every threat, every challenge is an opportunity if we can seize them, if we can, not size them, but seize them. All right, so that's it from my side. I'm happy to answer questions and the like. Thank you, colleagues. Back to you, Skura.
Thank you, Dr. Maharaj. Maybe I'll just ask my colleagues to keep the questions till we come to the end, unless somebody feels like you may forget something and you'd rather talk about it now. You're free to do so, but I think we could just hold till the end. Any hands? Okay, maybe let's just put all the questions together at the end. Now I'm going to introduce the next speaker, Subs Munsami. Dr. Munsami started off as a town planner, town and regional planner in 1983, which is 30 years ago, for the city. She has been the head of planning for 12 years and now serves as the program manager for urban renewal. For urban renewal, capacity development, policy, and institutional support for local government and planning are her interests. She currently works within the urban renewal space, which demands a partnership approach and inclusivity. In 2017, she graduated with a PhD in town and regional planning from the University of Pretoria. Research being focused on the changing practice from the inside of the municipalities with the support from professional councils, institutes, and teaching. Dr. Munsami, the floor is yours. Subs.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks for the introduction, Skura, and good morning to all the members, a number of old friends, city colleagues present and past. And you know when you're old, when your classmate's daughter is also the fully established practitioner. So anyway, just to jump into it, I am not going to get into too much specifics about the inner city, but just to relay and share information and open discussions about what is being done from the city side, what could be done, how it's seen, more or less, and just so we can understand how the city is engaging with it and really get more critical discussion on that. That would be great. So I'm gonna shut down the video and then just go straight to the presentation, if that's okay. If that's visible, I presume. If anything, just give me a shout. So I think for a number of people that are on this call, you're well aware that the city does have a local area plan, and I'll explain that in a little bit. But I think before even getting there, there's obviously context and problematization that matters when you're dealing with something like the inner city, or development and growth and that interface and conflicts that it normally shows up so starkly. So just to put that as a point, and maybe we can pick that up in a discussion as well. I will give a quick overview of the local area plan and the regeneration strategy, give you a sense of, it should say budget, but the institutional arrangements. What are some of the problems, inclusive of spatial budgeting, which is an issue, but also about where more money can come from and what does that mean. Interventions that are
sorry, Subs, are you sharing a screen?
Yes, I am. Let me just
yeah, because it's not appearing. I was wondering whether you were doing an introduction or you're going to share the screen, because it's not appearing.
Better?
Yes, yeah, perfect. Thank you. I thought you were doing an introduction, so.
No, that's fine. It's it should have been shared, but nonetheless.
Yeah. Now we can see it.
I was going to give some snippets of the festive season, but I think it will be useful to take discussion if one wants to be in that space, and then obviously the questions and discussions. So I think Ajiv sets up a good contextual appreciation of the inner city, and it still boggles the mind. Why don't we put more efforts into the inner city, and what prevents us from doing this? And I think that goes back into the notion of institutional arrangements, problematization. Often we just want to respond to things as regulatory, etc. But that's my viewpoint. But I'm also speaking on behalf of the city. So sometimes the views are not necessarily the city and my own. So maybe that's what I should qualify. It's needless to say that the inner city is unique, as most inner cities in every country, every city, including South Africa. And with us, given the port city interface, the tourism interface, that's important. The value that we speak about in the inner city is unparalleled. You can create as many Shongwenis as you want and Umshlangas, and you won't get that value in terms of culture, pace, vibe, and even financial value, depending what you count in and what you count out. In terms of inclusivity, again, something that is unparalleled, what has changed, the amount of transformation that has taken place in spite or despite of the city. And I think those things can't go unnoticed. We speak about the SME sectors, the informal economy, constantly under pressure, but how do we have to respond to that? Also in a way that also indicates regeneration, growth of the inner city, some forms of chaotic regularization, but also cleanliness, etc. So it's that kind of conflicts to deal with. Diversity in terms of education, health, etc. And I guess in the last 7 to 8 years, 2 universities have set up and a number of colleges. Some of them not necessarily that meets the standard, but nonetheless, they're setting up in the inner city. And Ajib speaks to the global business indicators, the call centers, etc. They want to be here because of the amount of labor they can have, the convenience, and just it's a cheaper cost of doing business, and notwithstanding the tourism assets and sector. So for all of these reasons and more, it makes the inner city a game changer. Coming to the local area plan, it was done in 2016 and 2017, the regeneration strategy. And it really looks at, takes the boundary from the sea. It includes Greyville and Warwick to the west, up to the north, to the Umgeni River, and down to the point in the waterfront. Largely 3 wards, 8 precincts, and what one is looking at is growing the population. And again, this then brings in some of the discussions of how do you grow an inner city population without providing the necessary support. And I think also with COVID, one is talking about sensible forms of densification. That does not mean densification is something you would throw the baby out with the bathwater. So an increase in population, an increase in jobs. The role of accommodation is really underscored here, especially affordable accommodation, and then that also of mixed income accommodation. Tourism, given the kind of, and that's why I wanted to bring in the snippets of the festive season, the important role of this inner city and what it can and what it should and what it did and what it could still play in terms of tourism. The issue of innovation and the informal economy and startups, etc. There's a lot that still happens and a lot that maybe is happening, but again, is also what do we know and how do we record that and make sense of it and support it in a decision, in actions, etc. We speak about diversity and a walkable city, and in many ways this can be achieved. And some things are bigger and some things are smaller. So I don't think it's unsurmountable. It's really achievable. That's from where I sit in. That would be some of the discussions worthy of opening up. This is built on the notion we have an inner city distribution system and a BRT system that works, and we know that this has not happened, and this also undermines what do you achieve in terms of a walkable city and how you manage that, and then also to transition to better energy use, recycling, the uses of finite resources like water, etc. It's premised on I would call it 4 large pillars, centered with the being bold, being coordinated from a political and administrative leadership perspective, and with strong partnerships. On the one quadrant, we're talking about big and small projects. And here is just to point out that often we forget the importance of small projects, and not to be coining the Andaruti Roy, but there are small things that matter. And some of these things do change and shift the space. Our focus has been largely on the large projects on the catalytic side. Notwithstanding this, some of them are really important. for the inner city. And some of the, a number of smaller projects also could shift the inner city differently. We speak about appropriate policies for development, and I think Ajib spoke to you or showed you the example of the bespoke inner city economic rates rebate supportive policy. And my colleague Nolitha will also pick up on how this, together with other matters in terms of the problematic buildings or the bad buildings, as to try and attract and retain business in the inner city and investment. There's the other notion of precinct management and placemaking. We've been supporting this, but also, to be honest, limping and struggling along the way. And again, there's a lot more that can be done in this space institutionally if we make that work in a way that it should. So nonetheless, we have several special rated areas in the inner city. Some of them are on a voluntary basis, some of them are fully fledged, and later on we can chat how this works. But yes, it comes with pros and cons. Sometimes it's just more policing, which then just displaces kind of issues of where the problems are to some other area. We then have a big issue about getting to the basics, which is really about coordinated daily urban management. And it's important to understand these differences as you work in the city. We kind of like try and just cluster everything together, and sometimes we miss the nuances. So daily waste being picked up, recyclers being supported, recyclers being managed in a way that it's a way that you can reduce the amount of waste, earn a revenue, but it's also about intensive urban management. Law enforcement in a way that you deal with the big issues, you support the small issues, you find new alternatives. And it's also about how this links into preventing issues of problematic buildings, bad buildings. Where do you? It's a bit like this issue you hear about trafficking. If you don't actually intervene within 2 days, 48 hours, 24 hours, obviously then you take it into years in a city context, certain things will happen, and you can see that happening, and they just become, it just compounds over time. And then to also understand infrastructure investment in a spatial context, infrastructure investment from a maintenance context, and that also what it means from the city side, around public property, around its streets, its parks, its tourism areas, etc. So that's the model. It's premised around the approach. What we've also tried to do is, we know we can't be everywhere within the inner city. We'd like to be there. What we've looked at, and you can see, we're trying to really reinforce that which really works. So the red crosses is maybe some ways you can see it as places that you need to support. And if not, yes, there are health issues in that regard, but it's really around your tourism area, going down to your point, your marina, your ICC, the heart of the inner city, ICC, City Hall, and also what we call the cultural precinct, Rivertown, etc. The sports precinct up to the Blue Lagoon Greens, as well as then that of Grable Racecourse and Warwick. And it sounds like everything, but there is a bit of a missing middle in that. But also that's where some of the projects are happening. That's where some of the private initiatives are there. And that's how we want to crowd in and work together. And you'll see this getting a little bit more clarity as we go into, if I show you the types of projects that have happened and are work in progress to date. So it's really to give you the sense of where we want to focus in. And it's, as I explained, that kind of picture. So it's a spatial framework within the inner city as to how to unleash potential and test and pilot. The big issue, though, is consistency and keeping the vision going. And like I said, the consistency. Institutionally, the shifts and changes are quite erratic, and sometimes quite often it happens that, it's every 6 months there's, okay, we want to do this and let's start again from basics, as if to say nothing has happened. So those are some of the challenges you have in an institutional setup, like I think a city or eThekwini for that matter, but I think most cities go through that. some have less issues than us, but yeah, nonetheless. Not to go through all the detail, but one would say, what is a local area plan and where it sits? So just to note that it is a legal plan in terms of our planning bylaws. It sits within that package of plans. So in some ways, even though everything may not be implemented as it should be, but it gives you a legal basis, whether you're a practitioner, whether you're an institutional, you work for the city, you're an activist, it gives you a place of where you can say, well, this is in the plan, and this is what I would like to do, and this is what I'd like to advocate, why to do it or why it's not been done. So that speaks to the legalities of the plan. How often the plan is changed? It's between 5 and 8 years, depending on the major changes. The one big thing about this particular plan is, and I can't say there is a plan for the Port of Durban. It has been a presentation. We've not received it as yet, but it certainly creates a lot of uncertainty as to what will happen with the local area plan, with the point development, specifically around the road infrastructure, etc., based on some of the Port of Durban developments they would like to see, and the increase of activity within the Port of Durban that interfaces that specifically with the inner city. There are obviously other big shifts that has happened in terms of offices, COVID, etc. At the same time, also around the economy. So those are some of the big shifts. But like I said, the big one is actually the Port of Durban. The way that this is organized, and not to bore you with the detail, but there's actually, and that's how I'm gonna quickly dash through some of the interventions. It's around like 6 areas. I'll speak to 5. I won't do the performance reviews, etc. But it's really about focusing on daily services and operations, crime, managing the built and public environment, partnerships, and development, big and small, and financing, and being strategic about that. So again, like I said, it won't be the details, but if we look at like enhancing daily services and operations, we have people that are looking specifically from our known as Durban Solid Waste or Community Cleansing and Solid Waste, looking at issues of cleansing, illegal dumping, recycling. And I want to just underscore the recycling, because I think we can do much more with the active recyclers we have and how we can make this actually work more positively. There's issues around public health. There's this, if you walk on the beachfront, there's this issues of pigeons and rodents, etc. And it links back into food, into some simple things like how often stormwater is clean, where grease traps, I don't want to bore you with the detail, but there are some smaller things that matter that actually allows for the cleanup of the inner city. And then there's precinct management. And I'll speak a little bit about that, both from a council side as well as the private sector side. Just around some of the notions on what our CSW colleagues want to look at, and I'm not going to go through this, but it's really about looking at additional shift systems, looking at roving teams, etc. But you'll ask why this, and just sometimes to get an additional shift is such a challenge in the inner city. We just come out of the festive season. We had seasonal workers, and we also, to share, it's not just about a shift for people to clean up, but you also have to have people that escort you because it's unsafe. So the issue of safety and working in the inner city, be it for the private sector, the public sector, is also increasing how much and what you do with your resources, basically eating into resources. On the SRAs, like I said, we have existing ones, ones that we want to extend or help extend because it's a special rated area, and ones that we would like the city to be more active in. Here again, and not to again bore people, there are legislative constraints on how a city supports an SRA, but doesn't mean we can't look at resources. So we could be putting in more traffic officers as an example, or an additional cleaning service in that area, So it doesn't mean that we have to contribute X amount of money to a special rated area, but we should be actually also having to look at how we overcome these challenges. What we do have is the points being managed by a points SRA in some ways, with the city being a contributor there, more so because it is a property owner in that setup. Then we're looking at South Beach, we're looking at the area of the ICC, which we call Northeast Business, and the CBD, the little hatched area, the mustard area. And then there's other areas outside, like sort of Florida Road, Glenwood, Umbilo, etc. So it's really about how we can find ways to actually make top-up services work. But herein again is a conflict. How do you make top-up services work when the primary services are missing? So it's really about also means and ways to strengthen the actual institution and in the manner in which it delivers services. So I'm just like throwing a number of these things out there so you can also understand what is being done and some of the matters that we're dealing with. Reducing crime, it's really partly it's about visible policing. There seems to be some better coalition between SAPS and Metro Police. There's a number of private security which we also need to bring into the mix, notwithstanding that there's a thin line between, or rather there should be really a double thick line between private security and public security, and in a way that people can, all sorts of people can feel protected. Safe buildings and problematic land uses, my colleague Nolitha will pick up on. But that is also a key area of focus in sorting out crime or reducing crime. And maybe just to flag, and maybe it's a point of discussion, Chairperson, is the issue of how and what's the take we could have on a more faster track and a more proactive track on a MAFA for private and public buildings, as an example. Then we speak about tourism safety, and we use the example of Cape Town. We come out in the festive season, but we ideally should have a tourism safety unit. And again, it's about getting specific services from local government for specific needs for the inner city. And then managing homelessness is a big issue. It does take away, as much as it's an issue that we understand. There's the issues of capital and crisis of a lack of a social net, but it also takes away what it means to invest in the inner city. If you're hardcore, not even hardcore, if you're a person that opens up a business every day and you have to clean and pressure hose, etc., etc. If you want to go to the beach, what happens on the beach, the damage to infrastructure, these are real issues. And it's also it's not a homogeneous community. We say homelessness, but there are a number of people within that. And people tend to think that all homeless people are on some level of substance or dangerous, etc. So again, it's a difficult one to actually work through. Then there's another category of, just to give you the homelessness, and in some points, I just give you a little bit more of a deep dive. Here we work with which we help to create the special purpose vehicle called City People. I must admit, it's a great initiative, but again, as the city, we're not necessarily giving it the kind of support it needs financially and access to a number of resources that we should be able to do that, so that it can actually do its business better. But some of the items that it's, or some of the activities it's dealing with is around shelters. We supported it with one building, our first harm reduction center just across from Game Center, or what's it called, City View, known as the Belhaven Drop-In Center, or DUT, and TB, HIV, and some other partners. We have another drop-in center near the customs office. It's a shabby old area, but it still works as a drop-in center. But there's like things that are being done. At the same time, there are big issues about shelters, about what the standard of a shelter should be like, because we just treating it like it should be accommodation, and it's just way too expensive to comply. But at the same time, you under comply and it becomes a dive. So where is the middle road? Feeding schemes, central feeding schemes, so it doesn't all have to happen on the beachfront, etc., but just slightly away. a space where you could have like common diners, etc. These are the things that we want to look at. Then we spoke about problem buildings and supportive interventions, but just to say that the UDZ is still up and alive, and National Treasury has extended that with SARS till 2025. That's the UDZ boundary. The take-up has been less here, and I'm sure there's various reasons about why, as opposed to in Tshwane, Joburg, and Cape Town. We spoke about the economic rates. The way it's also designed is to also understand regeneration, which is often you're not adding something new, but you can't actually also do your full 1,000 square meters, but you do different levels. You may buy a building and you may do the first two levels as an example, you know, ground floor and second floor, whatever it is, up to second floor. But the rebates, the economic incentive tries and understand how people in the inner city and investors in the city want to work, and they've made that easier. So in some cases there won't be a building plan, but it will be a QS statement, etc. So those things have come through. And I think there's other bits and pieces which I won't speak to because I think Nolitha will cover. Then we speak about the public realm. And again, it's about understanding streets and pavements are equally important. There are key activities that happen here. And I think if we get a better handle and a better partnership with these key stakeholders, especially around public transport and informal trade, it starts really changing how the public realm can be used still for these purposes, but in a way that can still be managed, maintained, serviced, be more attractive, etc. We speak about safe walking corridors. There's issues around public toilets. There are a number that don't work. There are a number that are not operational. And we're also thinking of areas where we should be doing more. And now the city's coming to the realization that, not that we're saying the private sector must deal with toilets as such, but it's something, if there's enough money and less risk into it, then it's something that could be looked at, and we actually want to understand that if there's a market for that. General issues, like I think there's now a dedicated contract. If you saw the weeds were going really wayward in the inner city, there's a dedicated contract just for the inner city. And constantly I use these issues in a sense that we say we have resources, but we do not have dedicated resources, capital and operational, to deal with the specifics of the inner city. And there needs to be an evolution of some of the things we deal with. It can't be business as usual. Simple issues around lighting, that non-functional lights, not just with load shedding, how you treat intersections. These are real issues, greening of the inner city, activations, etc. I saw some colleagues on here, and it's not about the details about explaining public realm, but it's also about, like I said, we're speaking about what we refer to as the prioritized areas of the inner city, from the beachfront, the point, the heart of the inner city being, if you call that the heart, you can also call Warwick the heart, maybe we can have dual hearts. But anyway, it's about the ICC, the Centrum, the Google Dlamini. How do you deal with those things? And coming down through Rivertown to the beachfront. So we've also looked at what we call corridors of excellence. The real issue here is, in my opinion, is institutional, also the ownership, the maintenance. There's no point in doing new if we can't fix and we can't maintain and be responsive quickly and responsive to that. So I'm just going to flip through for time. That's just to give you a sense of how we look at these routes, and also how we want to invite the private sector to be saying, if you're willing to look at public ablutions, etc., this is what we're putting out and calling the private sector. We have a number of contractors. This is useful, but it's also fragmented, and the value in that way is lost. But yeah, there's a number of contracts that we also have that support us in the inner city. Partnerships, I'm not going to go through the detail, but there's obviously a range around gardens and greening. What does come through, and I think it's important, is the city lacks an appreciation in the way it wants to deal with partners. It's like really like pulling teeth. It's really a very difficult space to get into, even when you're within the city, to try and work externally with partnerships. It becomes increasingly difficult, and we really need to unblock this to make it a lot more easier. We spoke about some of the projects, and there are obviously some what we call repair, what the next category was around infrastructure, and then projects, and also design work in terms of rethinking, remodeling certain things. Like, could it be cool? I think it's pretty much now conclusive that Walnut can be closed, so it becomes part of the ICC precinct. There's other bits and pieces that's been looked at, and it has its pros and cons, like Shepston Road, what would the role of Gillespie, Princeby, etc., and taking one across straight through from ICC to Rivertown, etc. Some of the projects, as I said, it really speaks to where we want to crowd in, and some of the projects that have been done, some are in the space of being done. Like examples, there's work being done at Blue Lagoon, around the beachfront, around the DPDC area, the promenade. There's a St. Netta's Museum, a Durban Eye, to crowd in and work with the public piazza of the passenger terminal, Anton Lambede, Rivertown. But a lot of those things is not about doing the work, it's about how you sustain and how you manage afterwards. So those are the things that come through. I think I'm just going to end there, Chair, and maybe when there's questions, take it from there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Subs. I will just go straight to our last speaker, Nolita. So Nolita Kudiza is an architectural professional with a bachelor's degree with honors in architecture from TUT. She's also progressing towards earning her master's degree in town and regional planning from University of Pretoria. With a rich experience spanning over a decade in local municipality, Nolita has contributed her skills in 3 major South African metros, which is Town, Joburg, and eThekwini. In her current position as divisional coordinator, problem buildings, her primary focus is on enhancing urban spaces by addressing and resolving issues related to problem buildings, thereby preventing urban deterioration and rejuvenating the urban landscape. A significant aspect of her work involves developing strategies for urban regeneration and fostering cooperative efforts among various stakeholders, including different levels of government, local residents, businesses, and governmental organizations to collaboratively devise solutions and work towards realizing the vision to make eThekwini the most caring and livable city in Africa by 2030. Sister Nolita, over to you. We have about you have about 10 minutes. Sorry, it's so unfair that you are the only one that has a restricted time to speak. But yeah, if you can be able to squeeze your presentation within that. Thanks.
Okay, Skura, thank you very much for the opportunity. I'll just go right through to the presentation. Okay, so the eThekwini municipality has set up a problem building division. So in that work, initially, we started working on mandated areas, which was zone 1 and 3. But however, now we are covering the entire inner city, as well as other areas where we find that the issue of problem buildings is further requiring more attention. So in our work in problem buildings, we have compiled statistics where we found that 75% of the problem buildings are owned by private owners, 7% are owned by national departments as well as provincial, and 12% of that is owned by the municipalities. Now, some of these buildings are occupied, and 21 of those are not occupied currently. We've also done a risk assessment and found the threat to life in these buildings and also quantified that in terms of percentages. Some of these buildings are hijacked, which is also an issue that we are faced with when we're doing the works, particularly within the inner city, where we find that most hijackings have taken place. So with that, a problem building bylaw was developed, which defines what a problem building is, and also just provides us with a vehicle in terms of how we can enforce that bylaw and ensure the safety of people living within that urban space. So the challenges that we found that are posed by problem buildings is that they tend to be safety hazards. We find that there's they're showing structural distress. Some of these buildings have, had fires within that, and they contributed to urban decay. They also impact on city functionality, as some of these buildings are overcrowded, and so that it provides, it then poses a strain on the infrastructure, and that's why we see a lot of, sewer bursting within the inner city because of the overpopulation that we now have found, which obviously is due to, urbanization. People are looking for better opportunities and such. You find that landowners tend to crowd these people within their buildings. However, it is detrimental to the city when these buildings are not being maintained, because they do deter investment. Nobody wants to invest in an area that has issues such as electricity outages, constant sewer pressure. We found that it also decreases the rate base, as some of these buildings are also hijacked, which means that there's no payments towards the city rates, which does impact on service delivery as well. Most of these buildings are also associated with crime and grime. We have found that a lot of drug trafficking happens within these spaces. Prostitution is also very apparent within the spaces when we work on them. So it is an issue that is growing, and you find that within an area, it ends up reaching other blocks as well. So it does require collaborative efforts, especially with law enforcement departments, be it your SAPS, Metro, as well as internal enforcement departments within the municipality, such as your building inspectors, etc. So the problem building declaration process, at times these buildings are handed over from other departments when they do their routine inspections. These buildings will then need to be presented to the problem building steering committee, so that we do decide if are we taking over this building, or is it a building that will be addressed by the relevant departments. Upon the acceptance by the PBSC, we then start the stages of profiling these buildings and identifying what are the challenges and if they're in line with the problem building bylaw. Because whatever we do, we need to do that in line with the bylaw. We issue the notices, which would be the notice of intent, and within 14 days, the owner would need to write to us and provide us with the reason as to why we cannot declare this property a problem building. If that is not done, we issue a notice of declaration, which then allows us to invite Metro Police to do a full-on profiling. At times, if we do discover some social economic issues, for example, if the buildings are hijacked, if we find that there are a lot of illegal immigrants, we then invite, the necessary departments, which at times would be immigration. If there are businesses being conducted, we can invite SARS or the Department of Labor. So at that stage, we identify which other enforcement departments will be necessary for that particular profiling. At times, we also do invite human settlements so that they can do the social profiling, so that we can determine which of these people are indigent because at times we would need to apply for an eviction order, which I'll get to that at a later stage. Okay, so once all of that process has been conducted, we then hand over to the legal department. So when we hand over to the legal department, that is when we decide, are we taking it to court? and which basis are we going to be taking it to court by? Because at times we have the option to acquire the building for a public project, which can be social housing. If there's a high municipal debt, then we can also force the sale of that building in sale and execution in order for the municipality to recover that cost. So at this time, it is determined which direction the municipality would go towards, or whether we're going to use our own funds as a municipality to do the remedial works that are required in that property, particularly if we do find that there's a dangerous situation. And we do recover those funds from the property owner because we do raise it to that property's profile. So in the problem buildings, we have 4 sub-projects, which includes the profiling, the issuing of contravention notice. We do multidisciplinary operations on an ongoing basis, which then we hope results in the closure, rehabilitation of these buildings. So the closure could be demolitions at times, or it could be repurposing. Other times it could be that the owner then takes on the work to fix that buildings. And at times we do the work that is necessary, particularly if we do find that it's a dangerous situation, or if it's if that property is within an important node, as SUPS has indicated that we have corridors that have been labeled as corridors of excellence. So the challenges that we find is that some of these buildings are owned by the state, which makes it very difficult, because at times when you deal with the state, they'll tell you about issues of funding that that particular building would not be utilized because they do not have funding. At times, they do try to dispose those buildings in open tenders, which usually fall through. We have, taken initiatives working within the DTM structures, and we have tried to escalate it even to the Minister of Public Works. However, when we're dealing with the state, the issue of accountability is very apparent. So this is another example of a publicly owned building. It is owned by Provincial Public Works. It's also hijacked. We've had a number of casualties that have, taken place in this particular property. I think right now they are finalizing their documentation for disposal. This one is owned by Transnet. It's not occupied currently. However, you do see that it's in, a very distressed state, and it is next to City Hall, which is a very prominent area. So, when you come to the City Hall and you see a building like this, it then tells you that, there's an issue within the inner city that would need to be addressed. We have also engaged with Transnet regarding this building. We are waiting their maintenance plan, because they did indicate to us that they do plan to effect some work on this particular property. So I'm not going to go through each and every property because of time, but this one is municipal owned. It's also not occupied. Okay, so this one is also one of the major challenges. It's 44 Lances Road. It's illegally occupied. It has been hijacked. Most of the people that are living on here are indigent. There's about close to 300 families that are occupying this building. And a MAFA application was made. It was determined that the facades cannot be touched. However, they do need to enter the property in order for them to do a full assessment. However, one of the requirements is that it needs to be vacant. We are currently struggling with that because this one has also been to court. We have received a court order that we need to evict the occupants. The issue becomes when the PI Act comes into place, where you need to provide alternative accommodation for the people that are living within this property. It's currently a challenge. Our Human Settlements Department has made applications to provincial human settlements, national human settlements to acquire funding because we have secured land, but the issue now is funding to erect the structures and services that are required when you're going to be placing people there, which is where we're stuck. We have money to execute social housing within this project. There have been designs that have, been documented. However, we can't move forward with the issue of the PI Act, which we have been, requesting for legislature to really relook at this issue. Okay, so these are just some of the properties within the inner city in various precincts. Okay, so on-site findings, we do find also that these properties have become boarding houses. Different, families living within these properties. Some of them are work houses where you find that people live, live, play, and work within these properties. There's no sufficient. These places are not habitable. There's no, sufficient lighting and ventilation in these areas. Fire escape routes are blocked. So this really is an impending danger. And we are working on trying to address it. But, when we try to move forward, we do find that we are stuck, within the court systems. Firstly, it takes years for our cases to be heard in court. And then secondly, when our case is heard in court, it's not usually beneficial to us as the municipality, because it'll give us issues like, you need to find alternative accommodation for these people. And we are struggling with funding. So those are just some of the issues. And then the strategies that we have in place are the incentives. I think Dr. Ajif as well as Dr. Soups did touch on that. But over and above that, with the sanctions, we serve notices, we prosecute, we do summonses, we apply rate code changes within those particular properties, which I think now is up to 20 times 23 of your rates. So if you're paying 1,000 Rand within your rates, if it's been processed on the rate code change, it then becomes 23,000 Rand every month on your rates. We have health and safety interventions where we introduce the Department of Labor. If you find that those properties are used for work, we do works on the properties if it's a dangerous situation and recover the costs. We do ongoing stakeholder engagements for public awareness. We also engage civil societies as well as the precinct UIPs within the inner city, which I found that have been also very beneficial. We anticipate that the outcome of that will be investor confidence, civic pride, and will provide a more safer built environment or urban environments for the people that are using the city. Some of the other long-term strategies that we have is that we've started engagement to request for the review of the PI legislation, because that is at times where we get stuck. We have reviewed the problem building bylaw. We had found that it was very restrictive. It didn't allow us to affect the changes that we require on the property. So we now have added aspects such as the maintenance aspects, which allows the city to affect the required works, and we recover those costs. This bylaw, we had sent it through to government gazetting for publishing next week, Thursday, so it should be out. We have also applied credit control and debt correction bylaws, which allows us to acquire those properties. It also then allows for us to do the sale and executions. We have implemented the building RAPS incentives, which I'll go into later on, because it is quite a new incentive. We are currently negotiating with the court system to prioritize not only problem building related cases, but building related cases, because often we found that an issue could just be a contravention of the national building regulations, but if it goes unattended because it's not getting its day in courts, that property often ends up being a problem building property. Regards to properties that are owned by government institutions as well as SOEs, we've engaged DDM structures to assist, as well as IGR. That is an ongoing process, such that they do report to us now in terms of where they are in regarding facilitating the affected works in these properties, or are they planning to dispose? And if they are planning on disposing, we've also provided them with the conditions that we require as a municipality in order for those disposals to go through. So this is the building RAP strategy that I spoke on. We've recently engaged the outdoor advertising community. The idea is that when these building RAPs are put on these buildings, it does supply a temporary fix, but over and above that, the property owners are able to generate alternative income, because we have found that most of these buildings end up in these distressed conditions because the people that are occupying are unable to pay your levies due to many issues. Like Dr. Ajif had explained, that there has been an economic downturn within eThekwini, which is one of the reasons that this could be happening. So the idea behind that is that the income generated, 40% will go through towards the rehabilitation of the building, and 60% will go through to historical council debt. We have worked with our legal department to put together an MOA, which we are going into with the property owners, such that we see this initiative being handled correctly. We've had a couple of successes, which have resulted in demolition. This one was a demolition. This property was also a demolition. This was another demolition. Here, the property owner rehabilitated his property and reworked on the use of this property, because there was a lot of crime that was happening. It was used as a prostitution house. So that has been resolved. It's looking relatively good. This is another property that was starting to show signs of distress. The property owner did manage to change that around and secure his property, as you know, it was starting to have unsolicited activities, as well as being occupied illegally. So this is another property which was also an owner's initiative. This too, it's now a student's accommodation. So the refurbishments that have been done, 17. We have undertaken 9 demolitions. We've resolved 5 dangerous situations, and have assisted 13 property owners regain control of their properties. So there's a lot of problem buildings within the inner city. So if you see these figures, they might seem small. However, there's a lot of work that goes into it before we get to the stage of actually resolving the issues.
Hello? Hello?
We have seen some owner initiatives that have, contributed to turning around the area. When one owner works on the area, you find that it becomes, something the next door neighbor might also, be encouraged to work on their properties and such. You find that there's a flow when it gets to that. So this was one of the good initiatives, which was the murals. That was executed by one property owner, and we found that it then started a chain reaction of property owners working on their properties. This was another success.
Okay.
Let's be real.
Yes, okay.
Okay, due to time, I'm not going to play that video because I was told that I have 10 minutes. However, that was a video of an artist's impression of how we envisage this program working. I will send it through to the chair, and hopefully it will be distributed to colleagues within this platform. Thank you very much. For any problem building related issues, you might contact Golden here. We also assist with the building reps regarding the outdoor advertising and signage. You may contact myself. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Nodita, and sorry to cut you off. Am I audible? I think I am
yes,
now.
You are.
Okay. Yeah, so I really wanted to have a bit of discussion or interaction of everything that was presented, which is why I wanted maybe the presentation to be a bit shorter. On the chat box, I think there's a question there on building plans, especially catalytic projects. Dr. Maharaj, do you have any comment on that? The time it takes to do building plans approval.
Yeah, I think it's catalytic projects is meant to fast track. So if there's a challenge, then I'm happy to try and facilitate and see what the problems are. Yeah, I don't know if it's a systemic problem, or it's something specific to a particular application. But yeah, we can assist in that regard. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Nolita, you also want to help?
Thank you, Chair. If I might respond. So with catalytic projects, I saw here on the chat, the issue was getting an approval. It's not getting a response. So the response is what is fast tracked. But in terms of getting an approval, you still need to comply with the required legislation. So the application is still assessed. If it doesn't meet the required SANS 10400 or NPR standards, it's still not going to be approved. However, the response time is what is being fast tracked. It's what is critical. So that's what is meant by catalytic projects are fast tracked. But however, it does not guarantee an approval because the application will still need to be considered and viewed in terms of the applicable legislation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mandisa, then teacher. Mandisa first.
Thank you, Skura. Am I audible?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes.
Thank you. No, thank you for the presentations, especially seeing the engagement from the city to the industry. We appreciate that. With the two presenters, I heard Dr. Ajiv earlier when he presented, he skipped the slide that talked about business plan applications. He mentioned investor confidence being down. We experienced delay in approval of plans. Ordinary homeowners and property developers, you find that especially the central, because if you look at Manzimtoti, Umhlanga, Outer West, Inner West, the turnaround time is good, but the central officials on the ground in Alford, they don't respond to applications. You put an application at LAMS, it will take 6 months before you get a comment, whether you comply or you don't comply, just to get a feedback. 6 months to a year. So I didn't hear a comment on that. Would love to get intervention on that space. And then the second one, there was also a comment, I think, on the second presenter, Dr. Soups, that you spoke about social housing. We wish there could be a lean process there because it's very cumbersome. When you deal with social housing, we've got SMMEs and emerging property developers that will like to participate in that space. And you find that you deal with social housing at embassy, the processes are not clear at the officials. And then you have to, after you get support from municipality, you must deal with provincial, you must also deal with SHRA. So it becomes very cumbersome. We wish there could be a lean process to support government in the backlog, but also participate in that space. The process is too cumbersome. Those are my two comments. And then thank you so much for this interaction. We appreciate it. Thank you, Skura.
Thank you, Mandisa. Tita?
Thank you, Skura. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, loud and clear, sure.
Okay. Just a comment on the previous speaker concerning the catalytic approvals. Our issue is the following, and that is that you submit plans on the 28th of August last year. And the first response we got from ETA was on the 5th of December. Now, how is that possible that there's no response? I mean, catalytic projects is supposed to prioritize those submissions. I had a situation where the fire was not approved. And when I followed up with the fire engineer, he'd already approved it in November, on the 24th of November. But to date, we have not received that response from the catalytic projects approval, plans approval department. So it's a huge bottleneck, as I said in my text. And the problem is that Umhlanga DAA is excellent. That team is brilliant. I've never had an issue with them. If I get a reply or a refusal, we can tackle it immediately with the department. We get it approved within a day or two. All right, I've had plans approved within 7 days. After they've been at catalytic, they've gone to Umhlanga for DAA, they've made their comments. Within 7 days, I had final approval. But the catalytic project approval takes 4 to 4.5 months, something that's supposed to be prioritized. So that is the frustration that we're sitting with. We only have email addresses to correspond with the people that work in that department. And like this morning, I sent an email last Thursday. To date, I have not had a reply. So that's the frustration with catalytic projects. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment, Dieter. I think, Dr. Maharaj, we will just follow up with the office and see if there's any intervention that can be done on this, and then communicate back to the members. Adima, and then Dr. Supes.
Thanks, Gura. I just wanted to say first, thank you to the presenters. I mean, I think each of you brought some really fascinating information to us, and also insight into some of the challenges that we are experiencing. And Skura, maybe more than a question to the presenters, rather a question to yourself about, given the time constraints today, is there perhaps a possibility that we find a way to continue this conversation in a more open, maybe at the Institute itself, a more open platform? Because a lot of the comments that are coming up and questions in the chat box are starting to make suggestions that extend to longer discussions. I mean, we're holding Sud, Sajiv, and Nolita accountable for a lot of other infrastructural and systemic delays in the government. Maybe there's a way that we can continue this conversation elsewhere. But I just wanted to really, I think, Sud, you mentioned the idea of the value that the inner city has, and I suppose, you know, and subject to what we count into it and what we don't. And I think that as much as that's really heartening to hear from the municipality, I think as practitioners, we also need to hold the municipality accountable to stay on that, and then ask for participation in discussions around how we facilitate the rejuvenation of our city. But thank you, everybody. Thanks, Gura.
Thank you, Adima. I think that's a very important point. I do think that we should dedicate, I think, more time for that, especially for plans approvals. Supes?
Thanks, Chair. I think Adima covered me to a large extent. What I would suggest is there are people that have specific problems, and to put that together, and pardon that you may have done that before, you know, when you sent your application, etc. And that we can facilitate that to go through to different people within the municipality. But I think for something more general, which I'm hearing people are saying, is around the central office, the region, around the GAA and LUMS applications, there is an issue, and maybe we can also help to facilitate a discussion with relevant people in that context, and with the KZNIA members that would want to engage in that. But more so, yes, you kind of have to do it at two levels. These are the specific issues we're having, but there is a systemic problem here, and we don't necessarily get it elsewhere. So, like, can we find a way to resolve certain things? On the issue of the catalytic project versus the normal mode of operation, I think maybe, I think it was Titia. I'm not sure exactly when he's saying catalytics, is he talking about the facilitation section or the catalytics? But again, that's subject to the specifics. And you've got email addresses, and I think Nolitha will be a very useful person, more than me and Ajiv in certain ways. But please copy us on your specifics, and we'll find a way to get it into the various places that needs to be heard. But I am, like Adima has indicated, I'm proposing that we have the discussion once it's come through to you, Chair, about having a discussion on the central region around land use management and NBRs or development applications. And the one other area that I don't want to also leave behind, and I think we must have that discussion, because we don't want to be waiting for 10 people or 2 people, whatever the case will be. It will be too much to burn, because we're also stuck in these matters about, similar to what happened in Joburg, about heritage buildings and timelines, etc. So here we're also asking the Institute to also help us in getting some kind of a system together, and to make these things a lot more faster. Thank you.
Thank you, Supes. Definitely would like to partner with the city and play our part, whichever way you feel as the profession can assist, so that the process is smoother. Dr. Maharaj, another comment from you?
Yeah, just maybe as a suggestion as well, building on what Subs was saying, is that one of my colleagues, Nutan Maharaj, runs a program called the Subnational Ease of Doing Business, Subnational Doing Business program in the municipality. And one of the areas that is looked at is, how long it takes to get a building plan approved. So what I can propose is that perhaps as part of that, we have a structured engagement with the Institute around bringing that external perspective, as from the perspective of the customer, how is the system working? Yeah, and because we do work with the building plan inspectorate to improve their turnaround times, improve their approval rate, and so forth. But yeah, that's more on the systemic side, not relating to any specific application, but general. Thanks.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you, everyone. Then we will definitely have a session specifically about building plans approval. I know that the practice committee has been doing so much work on this. I think a session involving all members would also be good. Thank you, Dr. Maharaj. Thank you, Subs. Thank you, Nolita, for their presentations. I do think that the presentation today is starting something, and I guess a better relationship with these departments as the institute. So thank you so much, colleagues. My apologies with the time. Yeah, we'll have to have a follow-up session for this so that we can really iron out the issues with plans approval. Thank you so much. Apologies for the time again.
Thanks, Gura. Thanks, everybody. Cheers.
Cheers, everyone.
Thank you.